Thank you for tuning in to Entertain the Geeky, your source for nerd news.
Hey everyone, what's up? This is Jason back at you with more nerd news. So there's so much going on, and I want to start right at the top of my list here because I'm very excited to talk about this. We have gotten a spoiler. So let me start off by saying I'm going to be talking about Endgame spoilers. I'm going to be talking about some things that are going to be happening in Spider-Man Far From Home. And obviously, if you've not seen Endgame, you probably listened to Tom Holland's warning and didn't watch the trailer that just dropped last week. So if you haven't seen the movie, we're going to get into some spoilers. So go see the movie and then come back and listen to us here. But we got a new Spider-Man Far From Home trailer. And like I said a minute ago, Tom Holland kind of, he comes in at the beginning to say, hey, if you haven't seen Endgame, go see Endgame. We're going to talk. This is going to spoil some things. So right away, they spoil, Iron Man's death, Tony's death with, Peter and Happy kind of reflecting on Tony and talking about how they miss him and, just more emotion, like we haven't had enough emotion through these last few movies. But we do get an interesting tidbit of information about Mysterio. There's been kind of, questions on both sides whether or not Mysterio is actually a good guy or he's a bad guy. And my personal opinion is that he, it's Quentin Beck. He kind of played the hero in his first appearance in comics, and ultimately it was revealed to be the villain. So that seemed likely to me that he might just be a villain and he's just kind of pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. And we're going to find that out through the course of the movie. But an interesting thing that popped up in this new trailer that makes me rethink that and kind of look at it maybe a little differently. I mean, I still think he might be a villain, but his motivations seem a little weird to me now that I know this. And it's the fact that he is from another version of Earth. So if you're a movie fan and you haven't really been into the comics over the years, you might not be familiar with the idea of the multiverse. But Marvel's done this for a long time with their comics, basically other Earths that have characters that are kind of similar and in some cases even the same as their regular Marvel 616 universe counterparts. 616 is the main Marvel universe, and for the first time in the clip we saw of Peter meeting Quentin Beck for the first time, he does designate Peter's Earth as 616. And he designates his own as 833. Which, right off the bat might imply that he is familiar with the multiverse or maybe has even done some multiversal travel himself. So that's something new for his character if that's the case. We have had iterations of him throughout comics history that have traveled the multiverse. I mean, the Spider-Men miniseries comes to mind where Mysterio ended up crossing the 616 universe with the 1616 universe, which is the Ultimate Universe. And Peter and Miles met for the first time. So it's not unprecedented, but it raises a few questions, as does the fact that he says he comes from Earth 833. Now, obviously, the 616 universe is the main universe. Earth 833 is a recent addition. It popped up during the Spider-Verse crossover from a few years ago, and it is an Earth where Peter, the version of Peter from that Earth wasn't actually bitten by the spider. It was actually William Braddock, who, if you're unfamiliar, Braddock is Captain Britain in the regular Marvel universe. His sister is Psylocke. She's a telekinetic on the X-Men. She was in one of the movies. I think it was Apocalypse. So even from a movie standpoint, she's popped up. But so William Braddock got bit by the spider, and he became a hero he called himself Spider UK. And his his Spider-Man costume was basically just the British flag with some web designs. So, and he's also a character because of who William Braddock is as a character, and he already had powers. He's a character that's familiar with the multiverse, and he's traveled the multiverse. It doesn't seem like that's going to be a character we're introducing. This is just, I guess, maybe 833 was just to, make all of us nerds who know about all the different Marvel multiverses scratch our heads and wonder why. They could just be, pranking us a little bit. But hearing that the universe we've been watching in these movies is the 616 universe was interesting. And the way Beck describes it was also very interesting. He describes it as a universe that has identical physical constraints to his own, and he calls their symmetry level 4 symmetry. Now, that's obviously, his knowledge of the multiverse and kind of similarities between the universes. But it also, for me, brings to mind kind of the coldness that Reed Richards talks about the multiverse with. And almost as if up the Marvel multiverse also kind of gives them a back door to bring in the X-Men and the Fantastic Four characters, if that were to be something that we, are all hoping they're going to do in the future. It gives them a convenient excuse to have these characters still be a part of the world, but also have a good reason why we've never heard of them before now. So, there's a lot of interesting kind of implications that this whole thing brings up. Obviously, is the 833 universe the one we know from the comics, or is it something that they're just kind of using a different designation? Does this open up, the idea of getting characters from the multiverse into the main universe that might not already be here, or might it be characters that only ever, popped up because of the multiverse, like Spider-Gwen? We'll see. The future is, and the possibilities in the future are endless when you start talking about the multiversal theories. So keeping with Disney for a minute here, Disney, made a crazy announcement about the future of their movies, and obviously a lot of the stuff that they've announced is, their kind of live action remakes that they've been doing of their classic cartoon movies, and then new cartoon movies and new Pixar movies like Frozen 2 and Toy Story 4 and some various other untitled projects that they're talking about in the future. But relevant to us as nerds, one of the things that popped up is obviously this December we are going to see the close of the Star Wars Skywalker saga with The Rise of Skywalker. But after that, we're going to be waiting a little while before we get some more Star Wars. So Star Wars is not supposed to pop back up until 2022. And that Christmas starts a new trilogy that will be released once a year, every other year. So it's in 2022, 2024, and 2026. So a couple of questions come to mind with that is this going to be Rian Johnson's new Star Wars trilogy? Or is this going to be the Game of Thrones writers or showrunners, Benioff and Weiss? They are also supposedly working on a Star Wars project for Disney. In all reality, one of the things we've teased is that we are going to get an Old Republic story. So my thought is that that's what this is. It's a good place to go. Also, it would really separate it from the Star Wars saga that we've been watching unfold that we will see concluded, this December. Excuse me. So Lucasfilm popped up with an April Fool's joke about the fact that Benioff and Weiss and Johnson are actually working on the same project. And while it got me, it definitely got me hook, line, and sinker. I read that article and I thought, oh man, that's amazing. Obviously, I'd forgotten that it was April 1st. I don't really think about April Fool's Day. But my question then becomes, was it a joke? Or was a little bit of it the truth? Are these projects linked? Are they still separate? If they are separate, how long are we going to have to wait before we see each of them unfold? Obviously we're going to be waiting until 2026 just to see one of the new trilogies concluded. So what does that mean? Why are we getting these guys on board so early? Because either Johnson or Benioff and Weiss have been brought on way earlier than their movies are actually going to be made or released. So the question, the question I'm raising is, are the trilogies linked? Is this one project that both the showrunners of Game of Thrones and Rian Johnson, the director of The Last Jedi, are going to be working on together? Time will tell. We'll find out. But the schedule just goes even more crazy from there, right? Because next I'm going to go to Marvel, and we know obviously Spider-Man Far From Home comes out this year, but apparently next year there will only be 2 films, one that will be releasing on May 1st and one that will be releasing on November 6th, which marks the first time in a few years that they've only done 2 films for the year. But fear not, because as soon as we go back into 2021 and 2022, we we're going to be back to 3 films a year. So 2021, we've got 3 dates: February 12th, May 5th, and November 5th. And then moving on into 2022, we've got February 18th, May 6th, and July 29th. So that is 8 films throughout the next 3 years that we still have no idea what they're going to be. I mean, obviously everyone has their guesses with the Black Widow solo project, and obviously Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 will move forward now that James Gunn will be brought back on board once he's done with his work for Warner Brothers. But I mean, a lot of this, even the biggest guesses, even the guesses most people agree with and think are right, still do not fill out all 8 of these films over the next 3 years. So there's questions. Are we finally going to get the X-Men and the Fantastic Four to join this universe? What new characters are we going to be introducing aside from the ones that are already going to be carrying us forward, like Captain Marvel and Doctor Strange and Black Panther? It's up in the air. I mean, they have promised us that this summer, once Spider-Man Far From Home is officially released and people have had a chance to see it, that they are going to fill in those dates. So this seems like a, kind of a prologue to a book we're not going to get to read for a few months still. But then, moving, obviously they've acquired 20th Century Fox now. So there was a couple of interesting things from the nerd culture standpoint that came up during that part of the presentation as well. We obviously know this year we're going to get to see Dark Phoenix, which is going to kind of close the book, I think, on these, these actors playing the characters. That one will be hitting theaters on June 7th of this year. But New Mutants, which has been up in the air for so long, whether or not it was actually going to ever be released, or whether it was going to be placed on a streaming service and just be shown to the public that way. Disney says no, they're going to try to recoup the costs, especially after the big merger. And they are releasing New Mutants on April 3rd of next year. So April 3rd, 2020. And in all reality, I never thought New Mutants didn't look cool. I liked this concept of blending a horror story with X-Men characters or with Marvel characters, mutants. So who knows? I mean, apparently it went through some pretty extensive reshoots. But so did Dark Phoenix. And I really resent people saying that that's proof that the movie is bad, right? Because plenty of movies go through reshoots for any number of reasons. Directors and editors sitting on the editing room floor and going through things and realizing we really didn't get the shot we needed there. We need to get the actors back together to reshoot this, right? So the idea of reshoot doesn't necessarily mean, oh, the movie is so bad and we're gonna restructure it and change it. Obviously, it means that sometimes, with Justice League, I think that was definitely the case. We saw kind of what Zack Snyder was leaning towards, and they weren't digging that, so they brought in Joss Whedon to completely restructure the movie. So obviously, sometimes reshoots can mean that, but just because you hear a movie's undergoing reshoots, don't assume it's a bad movie. Sometimes it's just a matter of reshooting some things that didn't really work as well as they could have, or we didn't get the right angle, or whatever it might be. So that's probably going to be the end of the, of the X-Men 20th Century Fox universe, is Dark Phoenix and New Mutants. The thought is that they will kind of get folded into the larger MCU going forward. So who knows? We'll know more in the summer once we get some announcements as to what some of these untitled movies on the schedule are. And so one more thing that popped up that, be excited, don't be excited. People are going to be talking about it. They're making another Indiana Jones movie. So Indiana Jones 5 is on the schedule with a release date of July 9th, 2021. So a lot of questions, right? Are we bringing back Harrison Ford? Are we going to kind of maybe tell a young Indiana Jones story? Because, in all reality, say what you will, I always thought that the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles was a cool show. It was just a fun little thing to see this younger version of him. And, he's not as gruff and he's not as cynical. He was looking at the world with bright eyes and looking at archaeology with bright eyes. Obviously, later we got a man who was tough and gruff and just this kind of, sex symbol archaeologist, which is strange. And if you ask most archaeologists, I bet you would probably hear more of them than not saying they don't enjoy Indiana Jones. because of how silly it makes them look sometimes. So say what you will. I mean, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull obviously was not my favorite movie, and I'm sure it wasn't a lot of yours either. But it happened. We can't deny it happened. And we're gonna go forward with a fifth movie in the franchise. Whether or not that means this is actually going to be a finale, or we're going to set up new stories, or like I said, maybe do a prequel series, something like that, is yet to be seen. But hopefully we'll hear some more information. I mean, this is, with a schedule of July of 2021, we're going to be starting to hear news about this soon, I would assume. So here's hoping Harrison Ford's on board, because I can't imagine an Indiana Jones movie without him in some fashion. So moving on over into the comic side of things, a couple of things have popped up. One has been released already. So this past Wednesday saw the release of, I guess not the release, the start of a year one story for Flash that is taking place within the current book, the current Flash ongoing series. So essentially they're taking a break from the regular stories to go back in time and tell a year one Barry story. And this is cool for a couple of reasons. One, because when you hear the words year one, at least me, when I hear the words year one, my mind goes immediately to Batman Year One, which was Frank Miller, and it was great. I mean, it was a really cool kind of idea to show how the hero adjusts to becoming the hero that we remember and the hero that we know. But a couple of other reasons it's kind of interesting is, in the first issue, we see the accident. We all know about the chemicals and the lightning strike and all of that. Even if you've not read the comics, I mean, if you've ever watched the TV show, it tells the story in almost the same way. So we see Barry kind of getting used to his powers. There's a little bit of comedy in there too, because he burns through a pair of sneakers because of the friction. It catches them on fire. So there's definitely some interesting moments seeing him kind of get used to his powers, but once he realizes what he can do, he starts pushing himself to go faster and faster and faster, and ultimately ends up accidentally running into the future and meeting an older, more grizzled, bearded, gruff, war-torn version of himself who kind of scolds him and kind of implies that this is going to be where Barry's going to spend some time throughout this year one series. So he's going to we're starting with him moving into the future, and he's going to learn from an older version of himself how to be the best. Which obviously, is an interesting concept for Barry. I mean, the very idea of Barry being able to run fast enough to run through time is an interesting concept, but seeing now through a year one idea story that he learned how to be the hero that we know him as from himself, that was taught by himself through the future version of him. That's just a really cool concept, I think. And I think, obviously time travel gets used quite a bit in comic books. But I think it's an interesting platform when it can be used to tell a good story. Sometimes it's used as a gimmick to kind of undo things or change things or bring characters back, and that's fine. That's what I'm talking about with the gimmicky thing. But using this as a way to have an older version of Barry mold himself into the hero that he needs to be is an interesting concept for time travel. It's an interesting use of the time travel, idea. So I'm going to stick with it. And honestly, I think you should check it out too, because really, even if you haven't been reading Flash, you don't need to know what's been going on in his ongoing book. I mean, they're up to the 50s right now with the issue count. So, but a year one story is going to be going on for 6 or 7 issues here. And again, you don't need to know what's been going on in the book. You can just jump in if you're ever been looking for a cool place to read Flash. Maybe you watched the TV show and it's something you enjoy, but you thought, it's been going on for, 80 years, 70 years. It's too much. It's too much continuity. This is going to be a good place for you to kind of get a cool origin story for the character. And sticking with the comics on the Marvel side of things, so a big announcement came out of this month's Previews. And Previews is, if you're unfamiliar, a magazine that comic retailers use to order. It's basically an ordering catalog that kind of lets everybody know what's coming down the pipeline. And so they can start kind of talking with their customers and seeing where interest is at and maybe kind of building that kind of interest themselves, right? And a huge announcement, something that has got me very, very excited, like a little child. I'm so excited. Is Jonathan Hickman is going to be writing X-Men. And it's going to start with a story called House of X. Now, there's a lot of mystery behind it. We don't really know what. It's kind of supposed to be a way for the X-Men to finally put aside the shadows and the hiding that they've had to do and just kind of stand before the humans and kind of reassert their position as people in this world that deserve the same freedoms and everything that everyone else does. So while that does seem kind of like a rehashing of some things we've seen before, the big takeaway from this for me is the writer, Jonathan Hickman, who wrote, FF, which was a Fantastic Four kind of side book that was going on while Johnny was, while Human Torch was supposedly dead. He wasn't dead. He was just trapped in the negative zone. So that was some of the best Fantastic Four. And in all reality, I'm not a Fantastic Four fan. But while reading that, I became one. And then I started branching off and kind of trying to find some of the best stories. But he also wrote Avengers and New Avengers. And he wrote them for a long time and used those books to build up to his big crossover, which he called Infinity. And Infinity was a great story. And, if you're a movie fan, Infinity served as a lot of inspiration for what the Russo brothers just did with Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Obviously, the big inspiration was Infinity Gauntlet, the story where Thanos actually snapped his fingers and decimated the population. But the idea of Thanos' children, the Ebony Maw, the Corvus Glaive, the kind of aliens that are leading his army, that came right out of Jonathan Hickman's Infinity story. So this is a man who is such a prolific writer that his writing is being used to inspire some of the biggest movies that we've ever seen. So when someone like that is going to take over a book, especially a book as big and dense and laden with history like X-Men, we should be paying attention. It's starting off with a House of X storyline that he's going to do, and we really don't know at this point which X-Men books he's going to be writing. If he's going to be writing all of them like he did with Avengers and New Avengers, or if he's going to kind of take the lead and have some other books that are written by others spin out of that. But we'll find more about that. We'll find out more about that this summer. But House of X coming this summer from superstar writer Jonathan Hickman. So moving over into the TV side of things, Gotham saw its season finale very recently, and in all reality, I've never been the biggest fan of Gotham, but I kind of keep up with the news about the show just to be able to keep my nose in it in case something interesting pops up that I would like to check out. And definitely that was the finale episode where we saw, a future timeline where the villains were getting out of Blackgate. Riddler and Penguin were getting out of Blackgate, and that was a big thing. So they had spent years and years in Blackgate. And we finally saw Bruce officially suit up in his Batman costume. And I can't help but draw similarities to Smallville's season finale when I talk about Gotham's season finale. Not because of story or tone or anything like that, just because here we were telling a prequel story, and when we get to the moment that we as fans really have been waiting the whole series to see, that's when it's over. I mean, if you're a fan of Smallville, or even if you're not, Smallville literally ended with Clark flying off into the sky in his Superman costume for the first time ever over the skies of Metropolis, and then that was it. The show was over. And while we did get to see a little more of Batman, of this version of Bruce in his Batman costume, a lot of it was happening in the background. I mean, he had a little conversation with an older version of Selina, where we could kind of see him in the background but couldn't, and then Commissioner Gordon, Lieutenant Gordon, and Bullock, Gordon and Bullock, and Alfred see, Batman kind of perched on a building, and so they get a look, and then we as the audience, they kind of zoom in, and we get a look at the costume, and the costume looks fine. I mean, in all reality, it's pretty easy to make a Batman costume. There's different designs you can reference. They kind of went with their own thing, although it did remind me a little bit of Batman Noel in a way that Lee Bermejo did, just in kind of the designs on it and the way all the pieces fit together. It kind of reminded me of that costume. But it looks fine. I mean, again, it's pretty easy to make a Batman. It's not hard. It's pretty hard to screw that up. They went with the all black, which I've always liked. So no color at all. The whole thing is just black. The cowl is different. It looks a little big on the actor's head, and I know that seems weird because you see like you have costuming departments and they're measuring this for the actor, but I don't know. It looks a little big on him. The mask looks a little strange. It looks like there's a lot of wasted space in it, where it could have been tighter and the rubber could have been pulled in a little bit to accentuate his jawline. But overall, I mean, that's it though, right? That's similar to Smallville. Here we are. It's Batman. Well, now we're done. So say what you will about it. One of my biggest critiques of Gotham has always been, it feels like a show that doesn't really know what it wants to be. They have cell phones, they have modern technology, but they kind of speak to each other with very old New York style dialogue, almost talking like it's the 1950s. The cars seem very out of place. They look very old. So it's just, it just seemed like it never really could figure out what it wanted to do. But it did it well. It had plenty of fans, and the season finale the series finale was very well received. Everyone's talking about it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not knocking the show. In fact, now that it's all over, maybe I'll check it out and maybe I might watch it all the way through. But I've caught key episodes here and there, just the episodes that I think are relevant, to conversation about it. But who knows? Maybe I'll have a review of it coming up sometime in the future. Sticking with TV, we are in, our final season of Game of Thrones as well. And we have, as of recording time here, we have 2 episodes to go. One this weekend and then next. The last episode, while it had some great moments, it was still kind of a lot of setup for a big conflict to come. So I wonder to myself if these final 2 episodes are going to be one big conflict, and then maybe the last, 30 minutes of the hour-and-a-half finale will be resolution. Right? Because you can obviously spend less time on resolution. I mean, I want to see a battle, right? We have a lot of questions, a lot of things kind of hanging in the air going into this final episode or these final episodes. But I mean, Cersei's making enemies. She can't stop making enemies. She just makes an enemy of everybody. And in last week's episode, she made an enemy of someone I don't think you want to be your enemy, and that's Grey Worm, the captain of the Unsullied. So we'll see. I mean, she's definitely writing a lot of checks, and I don't know if she's got the wherewithal or the military advantage to cash them, but we'll see. Here's hoping they stick the landing. So real quick before we're done, I'd like to touch on a couple of things that I'm very excited about E3 2019, which is coming up in June. So we'll keep your eyes on the website. We'll have plenty of trailers and articles and things that talking about what's going on at E3 because it's always a huge time of year. I'm going to reach out to our video game guy Mike to see if he wants to come on after the conference is concluded, and we'll kind of do what we did last year, and we'll talk about each conference and we'll talk about the presentations. But the big one for me and the one that I'm tired of waiting for is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So the Square Enix company is going to have presentations on June 10th and 11th. So 2 days of the show, they're going to have presentations. And, we've seen things about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. We've seen gameplay footage. We've seen, various other things, just kind of teases of what this game's going to be. But we've really heard very little about it since then. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that Tetsuya Nomura and a lot of the team at Square Enix was also working on completing Kingdom Hearts. And if you haven't played Kingdom Hearts 3 and you're a fan, wow, get out there and check it out because it's a fantastic game. They just recently added the critical mode and some new abilities for critical mode and the ability to play a new game plus scenario where you carry over all the Keyblades you've collected through your previous playthrough. So that's a cool way to play the game again and kind of get a fresh take on it. Use some different Keyblades that you didn't have access to early on in the game. But now that Kingdom Hearts 3 is done and it's out, I want Final Fantasy VII. And I think we all do. Anybody who played the original Final Fantasy VII is probably just as giddy and excited as I am about the possibilities in the remake. not only visually, but gameplay-wise and aesthetically, and just to see some of these classic, just really, really classic moments from these games recreated in a new kind of, just, for lack of a better term, unreal-looking game. I mean, it just looks unreal. So hopefully now that Square has gotten Kingdom Hearts out, and there's probably a small team still working on DLC and things like that, because those things were announced a little bit ago. But the bulk of the team can focus on this. So hopefully E3 is going to be their opportunity to talk about that. Apparently, the night before the convention starts, they're actually doing a concert, an orchestral concert, right there, near the convention center. That is the music of Final Fantasy VII. So I don't think that's coincidental. I think they're starting their weekend getting everybody hyped about Final Fantasy VII so that we can see, finally maybe get our, see some hands-on stuff and see some gameplay and somebody sitting on stage playing the game for us so that we understand it's almost ready to go. And the other thing Square Enix announced long ago that we are hoping to get some information of is their Avengers game. It's being developed by Crystal Dynamics and Eidos, specifically Eidos Montreal. But if you're unfamiliar, Crystal Dynamics and Eidos were responsible for a few games that were really close to my heart. I mean, I have this, I went so far as to permanently tattoo my body with symbolism from the games, or the Legacy of Kain games. And while obviously, programmers and team leads, stuff like that change, I'm hoping because of what we've seen with games, like the Batman Arkham games and the Spider-Man game that just recently dropped, video game companies are taking the superhero tie-in games or the superhero genre of games a little more seriously. And I'm really, really hoping to finally get an understanding of what this Avengers game is going to be. Is it going to be a sandbox kind of open world game? Is it a more linear gaming experience? Is it an online gaming experience? We just don't know yet. And it's Square Enix, so literally anything is possible. But those are just two things. I mean, there's a whole slew of conferences going on. Bethesda's got things going on. Obviously, Square, Microsoft, Nintendo, everybody's going to be talking, except Sony, really. Sony is not coming to this year's conference. But everyone else will be there, and we're very excited. I'm very excited. I can't wait to see what they're going to offer and what they're going to talk about. But that's going to bring me to the end here with this episode. If you're digging what we're doing here, do me a favor, go on over to entertainthegeeky.com. We've got trailers and articles. I've been breaking down Game of Thrones episodes from this final season. We're very excited about all the things going on. Here in the future, we've got some movie reviews. We've got a Hellboy review, I said Captain Marvel, a Shazam review, and obviously a review of Avengers Endgame. We're kind of holding that one in the pipeline so that everyone has a chance to see it, because I want to talk about so many of the things, but I respect the Russo brothers and Marvel not wanting this movie spoiled for people who may have yet to see it. So that's all coming down. Keep your eye on the website. If social media is how you follow and how you keep up with your news, we're there as well. At facebook.com/entertainmentgeeky, Twitter at twitter.com/entertaingeeky, and we are on Instagram at entertaingeeky. So follow us on all those platforms, subscribe, leave us comments, let us know what you think. We really always want to hear from you guys. We want to make the shows and the content a little more, fresh and what you guys want. But in order to do that, you got to reach out to us. You got to tell us what you think. Okay. So until next time, guys, do me a favor. Stay geeky.